So Steph, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Wavelength.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Robert, so you are actually surrounded by yacht crew.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? And that's what led you to create Riviera Counselling. Can you just explain for our listeners how that kind of came about?
Okay. Well, where do I start the story? Originally, I have a psychology degree, which led me into teaching. So I used to teach initially, mainly psychology A-level, but also to adult groups. So access to education and things like that. So that was a lot of confidence building as well. And then I took a sabbatical to join yachting. At the time, my dad was actually an engineer, and so I was aware of the industry and thought, well, I'll take a little break from teaching and go into yachting. So I had a few really good years experiencing life on a boat, working alongside other people and crew members. And then, life takes lots of different turns, but I ended up actually staying in France. So this is where I've lived now for quite a number of years. And coupled with that experience of yachting, I did omit to say in the beginning that I had actually trained as a counsellor in the UK prior to joining boats. And so I thought it was a really good way to add the two, amalgamate them together, because I feel that people on boats in particular do need sometimes a safe space to talk to somebody, and that's also particularly difficult to find when you're living in close quarters. And being aware of some of the kind of pressures that yacht crew encounter, I felt that it was a good opening for me.
Very much bringing your two experiences together, the psychology, your experience of being yacht crew, bringing those together to create Riviera Counselling. And obviously today we're here to talk not specifically about counselling, but about one of my all-time favourite pastimes, sleep. I do not understand people who say, oh yeah, I got a good 5 hours sleep last night. I'm like, double that. And then I'll be happy. Right. That's what I need, a good amount of sleep. But that's pretty much, we'll say, impossible almost for yacht crew. I mean, I very much doubt many yacht crew are getting 10 hours sleep. They're probably listening right now just thinking, right, I'm going to turn off. Kaylee, shut up about your 10 hours sleep.
Yeah. Sorry, very envious.
Yes, very envious of that. Sleep is essential for so many reasons. So let's start off by unpacking sleep. Why is it so important? What's the science behind it?
Well, it is the great restorer and healer. We all need sleep, and on two levels really. It's the physiological side of things, the physical side, cell repair, hormone production, just wound healing, for example. As well as the emotional processing of things that have gone on during the day. So that could be unpacking something that was heated, a discussion or an argument even with somebody, or it could be a sad bit of news that was received, but that at the time you just had to get on and do your job and you weren't able to even give it any thought.
See, that was quite interesting because that's actually something that I don't get to sleep because of. I say I love sleep, but it actually takes me a very long time to get to sleep. And it's usually because I'm an overthinker and I'm going to repeat all the conversations I had that day and be like, that's what I should have said. But part of sleep is actually processing.
Yes, to some degree. I can relate to what you're saying. Perhaps we can touch on some techniques for that later on. But I think, yes, and then also it's a time that we consolidate learning. So a lot of experiments, without sort of boring you with going into that level of detail, but a lot of experiments have actually shown that without appropriate amount of sleep, we actually don't properly sort of formulate the skills that we've learned during the day.
Okay, so if I've done some sort of training that day, and then I don't sleep afterwards, I'm not going to absorb that training the same as if I actually got a decent amount of sleep.
Yes, that's right. So I think that sleep incorporates dreaming, which is, again, something which fascinates me. Again, dreaming, which I think most people have heard of REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is when we do the proportionate amount of our dreaming. We do actually dream in the other stages, but probably REM is the most important. And again, if somebody is sleep deprived and they're not getting enough REM sleep, they'll find that in subsequent nights, the body will try to restore that sleep debt. And it will actually skip through some of the other stages, the lighter stages, to get into REM sleep in order to replenish.
Oh, so our body is naturally kind of going, you've not had this, so now we're going to have to try and catch up.
Exactly.
And I guess that's where people say, oh, I slept like a log last night.
Yes, I that's my feeling. That's my understanding. It still resonates, I think it's that restorative sleep where you just feel and know that something good's happened in the night.
And I think, like you say, it's that physiological and the psychological side. You said that even wound healing. So if I have an injury,
Yes,
and then I'm not sleeping, it's going to take longer to heal.
absolutely. So illnesses in general, that we need sleep in order to repair and to restore ourselves. So it does slow down the healing process, I'd say physically and emotionally. And I think most people know if they haven't had enough sleep that they can be very sensitive emotionally. Little comments might be misinterpreted and when perhaps no offense was intended. So I think sleep, again, it's just helps us to just be robust, resilient in physical and emotional ways.
And sleep is in some ways related to our eating habits and our weight as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Not judging anybody's weight, but it can have an effect on your weight, because if you are not sleeping, you're more likely to eat sugar.
That's correct, yes. So the brain, it feeds off sugar generally, and it's the first thing that we tend to turn to when we're feeling we've had that sort of dip. And it can cause people to reach for the sugary snacks if they're sleep deprived, yes.
Oh, that's definitely me.
Not too. No, I've noticed that in myself, actually, yeah.
Yeah. It's like if you wake up in the morning feeling particularly tired as well, you may be going for the sugary cereal over the healthy cereal.
The sort of long release energy, yes.
Which is, again, affecting your overall health.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Probably lead to more sort of irritability, sort of mood instability as well, yes.
And I suppose if you are in those kind of moods, you're not getting the right nutrition and things as well, onboard a vessel, that can have serious safety implications as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it does have a knock-on effect. I think in general that our performance, our memory, our ability to function and our reflexes are all affected by not getting enough sleep or lack of sleep.
And what about the concept of circadian rhythms?
Okay.
So what does that actually mean?
Right. That's also a very good question, because again, some people may have come across this in just general reading, but it's we all have a sort of master clock, if you like, and it's a cluster of nerves which is in an area of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Wow, that's it. That's everyone. Like, say that 3 times fast.
So like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yes. So that's this area of the brain which governs all sorts of, again, physiological and also emotional processes. For example, temperature regulation is under this biological clock. And the most important one, of course, is the wake-sleep cycle, which generally speaking in humans follows a 24 to 25-hour schedule. And we are also programmed to move with periods of light and to sleep during periods of darkness. So to explain a little further, the pineal gland in the brain releases melatonin. Again, I think people have heard that melatonin spoken about quite a bit. Basically, the melatonin starts being released throughout the day. It builds up to such a degree that come nightfall, generally, there's enough that induces sleepiness. So the higher the amount of melatonin, the higher the sleepiness. Corresponding to that, in the morning when we wake up and we look at, hopefully, sunshine, or sometimes it's artificial light if we don't have access to sunshine, this acts as suppressing the melatonin. Okay. So it sort of squashes it down, and when melatonin is low, we are more alert and awake. So melatonin's high, we feel sleepy. Low, we feel awake.
Okay. So what about the concept of people saying, oh, I'm an early bird or I'm a night owl? Is that just us trying to explain where we've maybe affected our internal clock? And actually, that's not necessarily a natural thing. It's something you've created over time?
There's probably some debate over that, but I think generally speaking, it is true. I think for myself, I can identify as one of those, and I remember being at university, living with people who were definitely night owls, and that would do their essay writing like late at night. I just think, how could they do that? Just function. Yeah, exactly. But I do believe that people are different, and we have this classification, and they have found that some people have a later onset of melatonin production, so it's released later, and therefore the sleepiness phase will be a little later on than an early bird that will have an earlier production or release of melatonin. And this relates to adolescents as well, because they naturally have a later clock.
Okay.
Sort of explain.
So, during your kind of teenage years,
Yep.
you are staying up later, naturally.
Naturally, yeah, and wanting to sleep in later. So, yeah, it's actually quite tough on teenagers, because with the school day, the way that it's structured, it generally works against their body clock.
Okay, so when our parents were moaning at us throughout our teen years to get out of bed, it's kind of actually, it's physiological.
Kind of programmed. Yes, that's right. Exactly that. Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to yacht crew, and obviously their circadian rhythms, it's sometimes also they can't really identify I'm a early bird, I'm a night owl, because really that rhythm is being set for you.
Right. Yes.
And did you find that difficult when you were on board yachts too?
I certainly did. I found that, I was working on the sort of interior side, but doing the sort of rotational shifts, it was, for me, very, very difficult to nap during the day, because I hadn't ever had a need to, and it's something I really, really struggled with. And I actually would find that napping for me almost made me feel worse.
See, that's interesting, because I'm kind of similar, and I want to ask you, especially for yacht crew, we're talking about sleep is important. If they know they're not going to get sleep at the same regular patterns that they would, say, at home, should they be taking naps? Should they be making the most of sleep when they can get it?
Yeah, I think, again, I've also researched around this a little bit because of my sort of preference. And I think, again, the jury's out a little bit. It does seem to be down to personal differences. But I think the consensus is that napping is good if it's kept to sort of shorter amounts, between 10 minutes to 30 minutes. That if it goes longer than that it might have the effect of making somebody feel a bit groggy, and sort of take them longer to sort of bounce back from that sleepy feeling. And also, I think later on, if the nap time is closer to when they might actually be able to go to sleep, it might have a detrimental effect.
So you're basically putting yourself in that sleep zone, and then you're having to recover from it
For
later
another short,
as well,
exactly.
for another short period.
And yeah.
As far as hours of rest are concerned on board, obviously the MLC says you have to have 10 hours within a 24-hour period. But obviously that 10 hours is split between, having lunch breaks, etc. So really, when we think about it, let's say you had a couple of breaks during the day, you've then got your long period of rest where you are expecting to sleep. But then by the time you have, maybe contacted your family, your friends at home, you've had a shower, you've cleaned up, you're then trying to,
to decompress
and chill at the end of the day, you're maybe down to, say, 6 hours. In which to kind of fall asleep and get a decent amount of sleep. Is 6 hours enough for someone to function on?
Well, I suppose, I don't know if people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, there's this sort of debate about this 4-hour core necessary amount of sleep, but it's anything above that, some people might consider a bonus. But I think, again, it's personal differences. You mentioned yourself, you like to get a good 10 hours. For some people, that would be perhaps too much. They would actually be fine on 8. 6, it's a little on the low side.
Yeah.
But, I guess within certain realms, that may not be much they can do about that. But if they were short on sort of sleep time, they could actually employ something called non-sleep deep rest.
Okay.
Kind of like a meditative type of state where you're sort of in between sleep and awakefulness, where you're kind of just allowing yourself just to rest with your eyes closed. So it's, I could, if you like, in the bio, we could put a link to
definitely.
Actually, Dr. Huberman, who's fantastic in this area in particular. He has produced a little, what he calls ND, what's it again? Non-sleep deep rest.
Non-sleep deep rest.
NSDR, I think he calls it.
NSDR.
Yeah. So it's his little thing that he's come up with.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can point to that afterwards. And I tried one out actually the other day in preparation for this as well.
I think that is actually quite interesting, because sometimes when we talk about hours of rest for crew, we then have to think about, okay, what is rest actually? Because we're not always fully resting. And really sleep should come with some sort of rest beforehand. You shouldn't just be, I'm guessing, turning off the TV.
Well, that brings us on to a very good point, actually, which is avoiding blue light prior to going to sleep. So blue light is emitted from our computer screens, from our phones, and generally speaking, it's not really wise to observe those prior to going to sleep, if you can, up to an hour. There are some people who are able to just sort of switch off and have a kind of master switch.
My husband is one of those people, and it's one of the reasons that I sometimes don't like him. There is nothing worse than when it takes you like a good half an hour to fall asleep, to looking at the person next to you who is just like head hits the pillow and falls asleep. And I've noticed that men tend to fall asleep much more easily than women. Even when I was traveling the car with my brother can sleep anywhere, everywhere, fall asleep in the car. Me, my sister, no.
I don't actually know what the research is on that. I'm sure there is some research on this, and I would probably agree with you.
I want to know.
I want to know. I want to know. We'll have to look that up after. But I think that maybe does that come back to women also generalising a little bit, but perhaps being quite forward thinking and planning and always thinking ahead. Maybe their minds are a little more busy in that respect. I don't know. Interesting to look into.
Yeah. I tried to have a look to see whether there was any numbers out there as far as crew and sleep are concerned.
Right.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find any exact numbers. If any of our listeners do have numbers and research on this, I would love to see it. But I did come across a lot of comments, a lot of groups, some articles about crew and sleep. And in general, there were two kind of trains of thought. The first of them was that, yes, sleep is not really a commodity on board. It is almost a luxury on board, is how it's coming across. And many people saying that it's difficult to get sleep on board because you've got poor weather to deal with. You might be in a shipyard with lots of noises, or even just kind of partying from surrounding boats. So noise pollution was kind of one of the big things that people said as far as sleep deprivation is concerned. I mean, do we say that you wear earbuds, earphones, etc.? There's quite a few of those like headbands that you can get now to listen to music when you sleep. I always worry about like that just causing ear problems in the future.
Again, I think that's very divided. I've some people will swear by those kind of things, ear plugs and such like. Again, personal preference, but I think certainly a mask as well to blank out any extra light, because of course light wakes up the brain, makes you think it's morning time. Sound, some people employ white noise, but even just listening to a meditation of some sort, or just music, gentle music. I would have thought that would be quite soothing and nice. But as you rightly say, there's so much going on, and boats aren't really that insulated for noise. And noise is a kind of stressor. It's another stressor, isn't it, on top of everything.
I mean, I do wonder as well, like so many more crew are asking for rotation, which is fantastic. And we are starting to see a growth even from sort of some of the junior positions moving from 5-1 to 3-1. It's still got a long way to go.
Right.
But would rotation be a benefit to sleep, considering the fact that you are on board a vessel maybe getting used to one rhythm and then moving to leave where you're resetting your rhythm almost? Is rotation really going to be helpful if you're constantly changing your environment or your rhythm? But then obviously when you're home, you're in a much more stable environment. I'm kind of like, I don't know which is kind of better.
It's an interesting question, because actually I have to say, when I was in yachting, it was before rotation was even a thing. It didn't happen. I think it's wonderful. I mean, I don't know how many different types. You mentioned a few there. I would have thought the long-term rotation you're doing, sort of more than 4 weeks off kind of thing, would be plenty of time to readjust. I think, generally speaking, if we look at shift work and sort of more conventional areas like nursing or fire brigade and things like that, they found that generally with shift work that it's better to shift forwards. So to start with, saying doing mornings, and then to afternoons, then to evenings, then to night, rather than going backwards, because it's harder for us to reset our clocks that way. And that our body will adjust. In fact, eventually it will reverse. the pattern. So if you're doing night shifts, whole nights, it will eventually reverse so that even your temperature rhythms will reverse. Your peaks and troughs will be at different times. And so it becomes sort of nocturnal, if you like.
Okay.
But it can take up to 2 weeks to get back into a diurnal pattern.
Okay, so is it taking like 2 weeks to get into your pattern of being at nights, and then another 2 weeks to get back into...
I think as a rule of thumb, it's a roughly, and again, individual differences, I think it can take sort of 10 days to 2 weeks. And I know for one that I'm somebody who would be terrible doing night shifts.
I would be terrible.
I think quite so. I'm saying so. And yet I know some people who have done night shifts for, and I know we're going off yachting a little bit, but I know that certain crew members will be doing night shifts.
Yes, absolutely. There's plenty of crew members out there who are doing night watches and things.
Yeah.
And let's say I'm guessing then if you do one night watch, that's going to be a real struggle compared to, okay, if you have a schedule of night watches that you can get used to.
That's actually preferable to do that. So they suggest that you at least have even a couple of weeks, if you can, in a certain pattern, rather than 3 or 4 days and then shifting. That can really just desynchronize somebody.
The other side of it is that many yacht crew are obviously flying in and out from their homes from all over the world.
True, yes.
So they're also dealing with jet lag on top of that.
Yes. Okay, well, that's another disruption of the circadian rhythm. And of course, and it's quite hard to keep the facts in my head, but I think it's west to east is the worst, isn't it?
West to east is the worst, yeah.
And again, it's that same idea of advancing the clock forward. If anyone is travelling like that, I'm not an expert on this per se, but Dr. Huberman again, he does a whole podcast on how to reset your clock if you're travelling through time zones. But it's a little complicated for me to try and explain, so I'm going to let him do that.
Because I don't particularly sleep when I'm on planes. I do struggle with it, but I absolutely love to travel and I do suffer with jet lag. And I've started taking melatonin when I'm flying. And I have seen some yachty forums out there that have said about taking melatonin in order to be able to get sleep.
Yeah.
But I've also seen that some people can actually end up being dependent on taking that melatonin. Is that possible?
Yes. Well, again, just a disclaimer, I'm not obviously not a medical doctor, and I'm just going on sort of research and things that I've come across, and also having used melatonin myself and seen other people. I do think it's a short-term solution. The stomach. It can be very useful. But it's the reliance that you talk about, because I've seen this actually even within my own family, that sometimes if somebody uses it a lot, the body will start to produce less of its own melatonin.
Okay.
So therefore the deficit is then you're sort of needing the melatonin tablet form to get to sleep. So I think it's something that probably shouldn't be relied upon too much. But in the short term, I know many people who use it for jet lag and getting back into the country's rhythm. And I think that's another thing which I hadn't touched on, that if you are going into another time zone, the best thing is to try and slot into the new time zone.
Okay.
Not stick with your old pattern. So even if that means trying to go to eating an evening meal, which for you would be sort of like morning or something, which is going to feel really strange, to try to actually adopt the country that you're in pattern. And that way you can sort of advance the clock.
So if you arrive in the evening, but it's your morning, then still go to dinner.
Still go to dinner.
Go to dinner and try to go to
yes.
sleep. And maybe that's an occasion where you would use melatonin in order to sleep at that point.
Yes.
Just to kind of reset yourself. Yeah. I suppose that would be for guests and owners and things as well who are flying in. And because I very much think, get a lot less noise than down in crew spaces. But it's still the same. You are still on board a vessel. For me personally, when I go to a hotel or anywhere new, the first night I never sleep.
Yeah, that's that novel environment, isn't it? A new mattress, just new surrounds. And I think, again, that's probably a survival thing. Probably comes down to that part of your brain that feels it needs to be a little bit alert because there's something new, something unpredictable, a little bit on alert edge.
And same for crew. I imagine there's many crew out there thinking right now, oh yeah, every time I join a new boat, I've got to reset. It takes me time to then feel at home on that new boat as well.
Yeah.
And there's so many different stresses that crew are having to deal with. And this was part of the comments and things that I saw, is that people just saying, I get sleep at this point and then something else will happen, and or I can hear noise outside, or it's a case of where I'm sharing the cabin, I'm asleep, but we're on different
exactly.
patterns. And then you're kind of interrupting each other during those times as well.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of things that we would love to say, well, that's an easy fix, end up on the same work schedule, but it's not an easy fix. And I think some people from outside maybe don't understand that there's not a one-way answer for crew being able to sleep.
Yes.
But quite a few captains commenting that what this really depends on is planning and scheduling. We've kind of started to move on from the times where, working beyond your hours of rest was acceptable. The hours of rest have certainly changed within the last 10 years as well. And that what it really comes down to is that planning.
Right.
But it's almost for crew, I feel like it's not just down to the planning of, your captain, your HOD, whoever it might be. It's also a little bit down to you as an individual taking responsibility for kind of thinking about your sleep and how you're going to get to sleep.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're not going to sleep. You almost need to kind of plan out, okay, I've got this amount of hours of rest. I'm going to call my mum. I'm going to get this. I'm going to read a book for 10 minutes and then I'm going to sleep. It's like, it's something that, unlike the rest of us, that it's very, very easy. It's naturally part of their day. For many crew out there, maybe it feels like something you actually have to think about.
Absolutely. And I suppose it is something that is wise to think about and to try and structure a little bit. But there's so many unplanned interruptions, as you mentioned. Your crew member coming in or showering when you're trying to sleep and all those kind of things. So I guess it also comes down to a general courtesy towards each other, to respect each other's time frame that they're on. And as you were describing that earlier, I was kind of picturing in my mind how people are at such different phases. You've got somebody who's like, hey, I've just had a great sleep, I'm awake, I'm ready to do my shit. Somebody else is absolutely just trying to stay awake, trying to get through the... Everyone's at different sort of ebbs and flows, and I think that's quite difficult to manage on a mood level, actually, as well.
Because we are starting to see more and more people talking about mental health on board, and there have been several different pieces of research out there from people like iSwan, Key Crew, etc., who've done research around mental health, the guys for mental health solutions as well. And one of the things that a lot of them show is that crew can suffer from stress and anxiety. I mean, on average, 60% of crew are suffering from stress and anxiety. Yes. Now, is that something that we can say is a result of a lack of sleep, or even a symptom? A lack of sleep is a symptom of it, or is it kind of both?
It's both, I would say, very much so. But it's a quite high percentage, isn't it? 60%. It's definitely something which I think needs to be addressed as much as possible. But of course, as you say, we're dealing with certain confines you can't change. But I think from the captain level down to the heads of department, it might be good that they're aware of some of these, because we call them stressors, things like noise, things like tight spaces, and not having a lot of your own personal space. All of those are added stress that we may not have at our home situation. Lack of sleep certainly can leave you feeling a little scratchy and a bit sensitive, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that is something which is a symptom and also a cause.
It's like creating a cycle, because you're not sleeping, so therefore your brain is not sorting out and processing your day.
Yeah.
And then obviously you're waking up the next morning, maybe a little bit sensitive, a little bit crabby, which is leading to stress and anxiety. And we're just creating these ongoing cycles for ourselves.
I think that there is a danger in that,
So what are some of the ways that crew can help get decent sleep? Let's say get to sleep and get some quality sleep.
Okay. Well, I think firstly is whatever pattern the person is on is to try to avoid that looking at screens and phones and blue light. Or you can get sort of night mode, which you can activate, which does protect your brain from receiving that wavelength. Because although a lot of people might think, oh, what does it matter if I look at my phone for a few seconds? But it does already. It goes in through the eyes to that pineal gland, which is the regulator of melatonin. So it gets confused signals. Oh, okay, there's light coming in, I need to stop. It's suppressing it. So it's giving your brain those confused messages about whether it's time to sleep or not sleep. So if you're going to look at screens, maybe activate the night mode. Try to avoid screens if you can an hour before bed.
An hour before?
If possible.
Okay.
And I know
because a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, I watch TV, I go to sleep.
Yeah. Well, again, I think you can watch in night mode, I believe, which is something. And again, there's always going to be somebody who defies this advice. You say, I'm fine, I can sleep through anything, I could just switch off like that. Maybe they're the lucky ones. But I think generally, rule of thumb, I think eat healthily, eat regular meals when you're supposed to sort of eat. Try not to eat in between. Keep hydrated.
I mean, is it true like having a glass of milk before bed can help you sleep? And yet cheese gives you nightmares somehow, even though it is constituted as dairy.
Well, actually, there are foods which are rich in tryptophan, which is converted into melatonin by the body.
Okay.
So actually, there is something in that. I wouldn't be sure of the amount you'd have to consume. And I think there's also things like nuts as well. So nuts and bananas are quite high in this tryptophan. So people can perhaps go and Google that and see what they can find out about what foods might be rich in these. And yes, so there is some truth in that. Our diet can aid us in becoming sleepy.
Yeah.
Becoming sleepy.
So maybe kind of avoiding those snacks before bed that are made up of sugar and things, and making use of milk but not cheese.
Milk but not cheese.
Bananas, nuts and things that will actually be good for you getting sleep afterwards.
And avoiding alcohol as well, because although alcohol might, of course, I mean, somebody's working on charter, I'm sure that most ships are dry ships, aren't they, I think?
I think there's an increase in the number of dry ships, but I think there is still very much a drinking culture within yachting.
Yes,
and it probably always will be. But sometimes people think, if I drink quite a bit,
then
I just go to sleep. But it's not really quality sleep.
It's not quality sleep. No, it helps people to fall asleep, but generally speaking, they will wake up again before their body needs to wake up. And possibly also be plagued by those kind of thoughts and things that haven't, go around, those worries and niggles. So it doesn't lead to very restorative sleep, unfortunately. So that's I'm glad that we addressed that one.
You said about temperature before.
Oh, yes.
So what temperature do we need when we're sleeping?
Ironically, the body needs to drop by 1 to 3 degrees in order to fall asleep.
Okay, so when I'm like getting into bed and getting all snugly in my blanket, that's not actually a positive thing if I'm getting warmer.
Yeah. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think, especially if it's colder or if the air conditioning's on, you want to get sort of snugly. I think what I do is my little trick is I'll keep like my arms out or one leg out or something, and then it cools me down, and then usually I
mean, I do know that I keep an arm out. I'm sure many people like me will hear you saying keep a leg out and think, well, no, I can't do that because like someone will grab my leg.
That's true.
But even if you know as an adult there is not something under your bed, I could not keep a leg out of bed because that's going to get grabbed.
Really? Oh, goodness. Okay, well,
I really hope people listening agree with me on that, and I'm not just like...
Let's have a poll afterwards.
We'll do a poll. How many people can actually let...
I'd be interested,
especially if it was hanging off the bed.
Well, I guess
definitely
also,
could do that.
I was thinking of health and safety. If it's a bunk arrangement, it might not actually be a good thing.
No,
you might end up kicking someone below you.
Lots of crew hanging limbs out the side of the...
Perhaps we should scrub that bit out. I think the body actually naturally does cool itself. So I don't think we need to worry too much. I think, but I think rule of thumb is a little cooler or just sort of normal temperature to overly stifling hot is preferable.
Okay.
So I think the body does have its own mechanism to actually cool itself down. So if you can aid it a little bit, if you can't, because you don't want to get your leg grabbed, then I suppose there's... I don't know the answer to that one.
Just make sure that you are kind of cooling down, that it's not a case of where you've got all the heating on and like 3 layers of pyjamas and things.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So good hydration, cooling down. I think that's blocking out light as much as you can. Noise, as we've touched on those already. Some people might also use a technique where they might have worries that come into their mind just before going to sleep. And I'm certainly somebody who things just pop into my head, and then I tend to write them down or note them down somewhere. And somehow that allows me just to go, okay, I know that they're there. I can worry about them tomorrow. I can leave them.
I mean, I'm someone who's dealt with anxiety previously, and that was definitely something that I used as a tool. If you are someone who kind of gets anxious, or like me, is just a world champion overthinker. Like, I could win the Olympics in overthinking. Like I said, I tend to end up having those, repeating the conversations I've had that day, thinking about the conversations tomorrow, and being mixed up with those feelings. It's definitely something that I've used previously, just having that notebook there, writing it down, and it becomes a bit of a pattern. Before I go to bed, just write everything down.
Yeah.
You know, just to get it out of your brain almost and onto paper.
Absolutely. I do this exactly the same. It definitely helps me, and clearly you too. Some people, when I've worked with children in the past, I imagine a worry jar, and you put the worries in the jar, and you can put the lid on, you put it on the side, but you can take it out and examine them when you have the time, or perhaps with somebody. And that's the same sort of principle, really. So so clearing the mind, and maybe it would be worth talking about a couple of those techniques.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We could said that there's all sorts of breathing techniques as well that we can give a trial.
Yes, we can. We're willing to do it with it.
I am absolutely willing to do it.
Okay.
You know, if I fall asleep, I have a little nap at work, I feel like the podcast is work. That's still working hours, right?
Okay. So I think we'll start with the breathing. And I believe that the military use this technique as well.
Okay.
It's also great for anxiety. So if you are prone to getting a little overwhelmed, and you might or might not be aware that your breathing becomes kind of shallow. And so when that happens, when we start to breathe sort of the upper part of our chest, that's when we're not really oxygenating properly. And it has that knock-on effect of making us feel panicked inside, which then makes us feel worse because then we're trying to find a reason. And so the brain's desperately trying to find a cognition or a reason as to why we're feeling uncomfortable. And so it snowballs. And that's another thing which I'm not sure if everyone's aware of, but the brain has a natural negativity bias. So it tends to look, it's always scanning the environment for potential threats. And it'll look for anything that could be a potential threat.
Okay.
Yeah, so a bit like we talked about the hotel room. It's a new environment. Oh, okay, where's the potential threat coming from? Hopefully none in that situation. So with this breathing, it causes the parasympathetic nervous system to come into play. So we have two branches of our nervous system. One is the parasympathetic and the other is the sympathetic. The sympathetic is actually associated with more stress and alertness. Okay, even though it doesn't really sound like it, sympathetic, it sort of sounds like the opposite. Okay, so the sympathetic nervous system, I tend to think of as the accelerator pedal.
Okay.
Then you have the parasympathetic, which is the kind of brake, just to put it simply. So when we do this kind of breathing, where the out breath is prolonged compared to the in breath, it causes the brake. It causes the nervous system, which is involved in slowing down, to be activated. Okay, so as we slow our breathing, we slow our heart rate.
Okay.
Calms us down.
So what are some techniques we can do to kind of slow our breathing then?
Okay, so we're going to breathe in a minute. I'll explain it first.
Yes.
So we'll breathe in for 4 through our noses. We're going to hold for 7 counts, and then we're going to breathe out for 8 through our mouths. I can't count whilst I'm going to be doing this, so I'll just sort of count in my head.
Like you can count for me, and I'll breathe in, and hopefully people listening will.
Okay, well, I hope that
give it a try as well. Okay, I'm ready.
I'll give that a try.
Yeah.
Right, so breathing in for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Slowly out through your mouth. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And pause. The idea would be to do it a number of times, not just once, but to actually start to get into that pattern. We can try together if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, should we go?
Okay.
Out. Okay, it's actually quite difficult. Do you find?
I mean, it's not too bad. It definitely is
slowing down.
And I think like that repetitive numbering
yes,
is maybe quite a useful thing as well when you're trying to calm down and get to sleep, because it's like counting sheep.
Yes, although I have heard recently that's perhaps not too good to do.
No.
Yeah, I think I actually forget the reason. I might have to look that up. Take a pause there. But I think it gives the brain something to do. It's structuring it, but it's not too structured, and it's moving onto a different task.
Okay.
So yes, the 4-7-8 technique is something which you could try. Again, it's got to be the rhythm that suits you.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult to count someone else because some people just breathe naturally a little bit more deeply than others. So obviously it shouldn't be too uncomfortable.
Is to kind of take a deep breath and then hold it for longer.
Holding it, yeah.
And then breathing out for longer.
That's a good way of just really getting all those toxins out as well.
A quick breathe in as heavy as you can, hold it, and then long breath out.
And actually, on top of that, this is more of a reset that you can do during the day for your nervous system. It's not so much about inducing sleepiness, but if you're feeling a little bit, I'm breathing a bit shallowly, or I'm feeling a bit anxious, you can breathe in quite deeply, and then you do a top up.
Oh,
and it's hard, and then you kind of just sigh and go. How does that feel? Like, yeah, and then another one, and then and it's just meant to be a kind of a relax, like a little reset. But you can do it any time.
Double breath in.
We're sort of exaggerating a little bit for the sake of the podcast. And I think you see animals doing this. If anyone's got dogs or cats, actually. Dogs certainly.
Cats are indifferent to the world, I feel.
Like,
they don't mind.
They probably don't need to reset their nervous systems. But dogs, I think certainly you can witness them. They kind of do that. They're settling down. Have you seen dogs doing that?
Yeah, definitely. That
they kind of like a juddery breath and then a sort of sigh.
Sigh.
And I suspect, and I don't have any evidence to support this actually, I just want to say, but it's my theory that they are doing a little reset on there. And it's sort of like settling down to sleep. I used to learn a lot from dogs.
Happy. Yeah.
They are happy. And we
should be more dog.
We should be more dog. When you think about it, they have a routine, don't they? They do the little circle before they lie down in the baskets or whatever. So again, maybe that relates to us sleeping, taking care of our routine, trying to set up a little routine actually. Yeah. That is a good thing to do, whether that be doing a bit of yoga nidra or meditation or listening to white noise or just music, perhaps reading a little bit, and then sort of gradually I'm working my way to going to sleep rather than just, okay, I've got to go to sleep, I need to lie down.
Exactly. And some of that is quite personal. It's about testing and finding things for you. Like I've got a friend, she always makes her bed before getting it. She likes to make sure it's all set up, it's ready to go. So if she gets home from work, make sure her bed is set up. She'll then go eat dinner. And then she knows when she gets to bed, it's perfectly made.
I like
and
that
that's
idea. Yes.
That's that thing. It's about a very clean environment for her. I think there's something to that.
I like that very much. I think it's also, as you said, it's a bit of self-care. It's sort of noticing that you want a nice environment to sleep in and you want it to be nice, pulled up and all sort of scruffy. Yeah, it sort of signals, doesn't it? It's okay, there's my soothing place. And I think that's a very good point. I like that.
Any other top techniques that people can use to aid getting sleep? Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about the cognitive shuffle.
Yes.
Because I like this one, and I've used this as well myself. I like to try out these tools. And so this was actually a technique that was brought, I don't know how you say, brought into existence, or by Dr. Baudin, and he describes the technique. It's very simple. You choose a random word. So we could choose boats.
Okay, boats.
Things we're talking about.
Very random, yeah.
Not so random. But so we take the letter B, and we'll spend some time just thinking about whatever comes to mind with the letter B. Any object that books. Okay.
Banana.
Ball. Beach. Okay. So that's the idea. And so you just allow yourself to picture those objects. Don't spend too much time getting too caught up in the details, but just sort of you can have colours by all means. Beach, and maybe you like the beach, and maybe you just want to stay at the beach, and then if your mind takes you there, you can stay at the beach. But it's just playing with your mind again, giving it a little bit of instruction, not too much that it taxes it, but enough to sort of give it that random sort of firing, which emulates what happens before we drift off to sleep. It's kind of little random thoughts that just kind of click from nowhere. I think that's the idea behind it from what I've read about it. So then we've worked on B, then we move on to O.
Okay. Orange.
Oh, I thought that one too.
Oats.
Oats.
Orangutan.
Oh.
I say that because there was porridge this morning.
Well, exactly, but that's a little bit how the brain...
made me think about it.
Yeah. I like that. So again, you get the idea. So we move on.
Just move on letter by letter.
Letter by letter. And I suppose if you haven't drifted off by the time you get to the end of that word, you could perhaps choose another word or try a different technique.
Maybe take a breath in between.
Do some 4, 7, 8 breathing in between or something along those lines.
So it's really just about distracting your brain from concentrating on one thing for too long.
I think so. I mean, I suspect that there's a lot of unconscious stuff that goes on, you know, that when you're talking earlier about certain worries that pop into our mind, they're conscious. We're worried about, I need to do such and such before tomorrow, or I've forgotten a friend's birthday, or whatever it might be. Those little worries and niggles that we're conscious of. I think there's a lot that's unconscious. And of course, that's harder to access because it's unconscious. So I think it's about, sort of soothing the brain, tricking it a little bit into giving it some stuff to think about, but not getting too caught up in the minutiae of it. But I think, again, meditation, deep muscle relaxation. That's another one I haven't mentioned.
Deep muscle relaxation.
Again, very simple technique, and we can put something in the bio afterwards. It's hard to demonstrate. Imagine you're lying on your bunk, and you kind of
imagine we're lying down.
Tense up all our muscles, including our legs, which I can't really do here. And then just gradually, you'd obviously do this with your eyes closed, preferably, you would try to isolate your toes and your ankles so that you relax just the muscles that around your feet. And then take a deep breath, and then you very slowly, and we're going to do this slightly speeded up, you'd move on to your ankles and then your calf muscles, and imagine them just sort of falling onto the bed. And then the muscles around your knees. So you take your attention to those specific areas and you try to inform those muscles to relax. Just relax, let go. Let go of any tension around your knees. And then perhaps you move up to your thighs. And you can expand this into, you can actually feel what it feels like to connect with the mattress beneath you. Scan your muscles. Is there any tension in your thighs? Just relax, release. And again, in between each time, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, making the out-breath longer, more extended. And then bring your attention to your pelvis. Just check for any tension that you might feel and just breathe into it. And relax. And just feel your body becoming sort of comfortably heavy. Just notice where it touches whatever you're sitting on. All right, now bring your attention to your stomach, your abdomen. Relax, let it go. Maybe just notice if there's any tension in there, in our stomachs. We do tend to hold nervousness and tension in our stomachs. And then bring your attention to your hands. Relax your fingers, your wrists, forearms, elbows. Let them sink to your sides. And then bring the relaxation up to your upper arms, shoulders. Breathing in, don't forget to breathe and relax, and just feel your body again becoming a little comfortable, a little heavier. Focus on your chest, your rib cage. Again, just imagine everything just relaxing and opening. And maybe even just send the message to yourself that you're safe, you're calm, you can go to sleep. Give your body permission to go to sleep. And then bring that attention up to your neck, to your face, your tongue. Let your tongue relax in your mouth. Let your muscles around your eyes relax. And just feel the tension sort of oozing out. And then when you feel like you've relaxed every single body part, just take a moment there to take a few deep breaths in. Again, through your nose. You can even do the 4, 7, 8 breathing if you wish. A little hold for a few seconds and slowly out through your mouth. And I would do that a good 3 times. And a 3rd time. And relax. And
I genuinely want to nap now.
It worked.
It does. when you sort of like have that tension and then you let it go,
Yeah.
it really does feel like my arms feel a little bit like chilly-ish. You know?
It's great.
I'm not sure how much work I'm going to get this afternoon.
I'm aware that I do that very, very fast and a bit speeded
Yeah.
up, but it just to give you the sort of the idea. But I think it is true because our bodies basically mirror and hold the emotions that we're feeling. So we often walk around not realizing that we have got a bit of tension in my stomach or my shoulders, and so just bringing the attention to those areas and just saying, okay, it's relax, you can let go. Yeah. Hopefully the brain will follow.
I mean, I'm sold on all of these things now. So we've got, instantly, obviously, blue light. Mm-hmm. There go.
Yeah.
Thinking about your body temperature.
Yes.
Using those breathing techniques. Thinking about your cognitive shuffle as well, and those deep muscles.
Yes.
All fantastic things that crew can actually use in the cabin. It's not like something that you require space or anything like that. That's just something anyone can do to try and get some decent sleep so that you're not getting into this cycle of lack of sleep, irritation, possibly poor safety on board, and going round and round in these circles.
Yeah.
So for any crew who are out there listening right now and maybe just reflecting, actually, maybe I'm not getting enough sleep, or are very self-aware of the fact that they do suffer from sleep deprivation. What would your kind of final piece of advice be for them? What if they're having that realization right now? Yeah. What do you think their next step should be?
Again, I think it just comes back to the importance of sleep. And I know some people say, oh, you sleep when you're dead and all those sort of comments, but I do think it's important to really prioritize your sleep. And I know that for some people go through tiredness and get a second wind, and I suggest that try not to do that. Don't go necessarily out socially if there's an opportunity, and perhaps sleeping is more important for your mental and physical health. And that may sound boring to some, but I do think in the long run that people will feel more rested and happier and actually more emotionally stable and able to cope with stress than if they stretched it and burnt the candle a little bit at both ends and ended up in that sort of sleep deprivation phase. They might be awake for longer but not feel particularly well during the period that they're awake.
Thank you so much for coming in today. Yeah. And we will put the details of Riviera Counselling onto the bio and things as well.
Thank you very much.
The other side of this as well is that if you are someone who is overthinking, or you are experiencing stress and anxiety, sleep a very important factor, but also maybe take a little bit of time to talk to someone as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.